I write books for teenagers. I am also a teacher. I teach at a college here at called Marianopolis. It's called CEGEP in Quebec, our college system. And one of the courses I teach is on writing for children. I write for the newspaper in Montreal, and a lot of my stories that are the fiction, the made-up stories, often it starts with a newspaper story where I start to do some research about a topic. I think it's because in some ways, I mean, I'm not so young anymore. I'm 59, I'm almost 60. By the time you see this, I might be 60. Some part of me stayed a kid, more so I think than other people. And I loved books for kids. When I was a kid, I was hooked on reading. And even as I grew older, the books that I loved the most were often books for children, like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And I did my graduate work at university. I did a master's thesis about that book. So it's just been my world. And I think because I've been teaching for so long, this is my 33rd year of teaching. I'm still teaching now, except remotely. But I'm surrounded by teenagers. And I don't know, I guess it was a very intense period of my own life. And I think I wondered about a lot of stuff. And that's one of the things that I love about working with teenagers is they wonder about so many things. And my experience of adults is they sort of kind of made up their mind about stuff. And I like the company of people who are wondering, asking big questions. What am I doing on the earth? What's the point of it all? What kind of person do I want to be? And that's why I love working with teenagers. And that's why I love writing about teenagers or also younger people. Pretty well, considering, because I'm quite a sociable person. I'm a bit like a dog that goes out with a wagging tail and can't wait to sniff other dogs. Of course, for a writer, in many ways, this is an ideal time. I'm very grateful to the young people who are staying home to look out for the older people. And this is a life-changing experience for all of us. And I keep thinking how it's going to change the world of literature as well, because there's going to be no story ever written that will not have some sense of what we've lived through during this pandemic, at least for everybody who's alive on Earth today. I really feel that way. So we're living in history, and I hope you're writing. Every single day, and I've been doing this is going to sound crazy to you, because I've been doing this for more than 30 years. I wake up and write 3 pages in a book. Oh, this is terrible because this is my new book. It starts tomorrow, but I promise you, in another room in the house, I could show you the book that I finished this morning, okay? So and honest, I tell lies when I write stories, but not when I am interviewed or tell you stuff about myself, okay? So every single morning I wake up, I have a cup of coffee, and I write 3 pages. It's just kind of loose writing. It's my warm-up. And I'm always happier for having written some, and I always learn a little something, even if it's a very small thing. And when I'm working on a book, I'm almost always working on a book, I can sometimes ask myself questions about the book or things that are bothering me, areas that I know I have to improve, and I'm often actually able to come up with solutions. So I really recommend writing and writing regularly, and that's what I do. The other thing, and this sometimes I don't do it every single day, but I'm less happy if I skip a day, and that's reading. I love reading, and I read almost exclusively books for kids. And that's partly because I have you'll think I'm a very busy person works very hard, because I also work for a radio show here in Montreal, and it's a French language radio show called Plus on est de fou. Plus on lit. You could actually look it up if you wanted to. It's an amazing radio show about literature, and I review books for teenagers once a month. I talk about the latest kids' books, and I read them in French, and I think it's really good for my brain. I'm an Anglophone here in Montreal, but my French is pretty good. But reading in French was, when I first started doing it, it was hard, and I'm quite good now, if I can say myself. I love being asked this question because it's a question that I like, that when I was your age, when I was a young person, it's what I wanted to know. How do you do it? How can I do it? How does it work? And there was nobody for me to ask that question to. I never met a writer. I didn't meet a writer till I was at university. And we had no internet, of course. I grew up in the 1960s. So if you wanted to look something up, you basically, you looked in the encyclopedia. And let me tell you, there wasn't a lot there. Once in a while, I'd find like a newspaper article about, a writer, or read an interview. And I remember like being hungry for that kind of information. My advice is pretty basic. It is write. You cannot improve as a writer if you're not writing. You have to do it. You just have to do it. Like the Nike ad, just do it. Just write. And don't be your own inner critic. Just let words out on the page, right? It doesn't have to be publishable. And in fact, it won't be, okay? And here's another piece of advice that I really wish someone had told me. You should expect, scratching, itchy nose. You should expect your first draft to be horrible. And I so wish that some curly-haired writer when I was your age had come and told me that, because when I tried to write as a kid, I'd write a little bit, I'd write a few paragraphs, and whatever I would write was horrible. I'd read it over, and we didn't have a delete button because we didn't have computers. Instead, we shredded, tore the paper, threw it in the garbage, got another piece of Hilroyd paper. Anyway, everything I wrote, I hated. And if only someone had been around to tell me that's a good sign. If what you write, your first draft, if you think it's amazing, here's my advice. You're not a writer. Your first draft is supposed to be horrible. You're going to hate it. You're going to be disappointed. That's normal. That's good. And what makes a writer is we don't end at the first draft. We go over and over and over until, like sometimes I say, until it starts to sing, until you read it over and you're like, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. It's close. It's getting there, right? And maybe it's that, for me, maybe it's that desire, like I just want it to be good and I push myself. It's never quite good enough. But it's that, I think that feeling of it being so difficult is why I'm hooked on writing. And sometimes, often when I'm working on a first draft, it's the same thing. I feel the old feeling that I had when I was a kid, that feeling of dissatisfaction with my work. So if you're feeling it, amazing, you're on the right track. Okay, so write, silence that inner critic, just keep writing, make it a regular habit, like my way is 3 pages every day, but you can make any kind of habit you want. Just decide, okay, I'm going to write on Sunday for 2 hours. It doesn't matter, make a habit. Okay, first thing. Second, there was second because I also said silence the inner critic. Third thing, which I mentioned before too, you have to read. You cannot become a writer if you're not a reader. In the same way that if you're a cook, you can't just eat your own food, right? You got to go to a different restaurant now and then. You got to eat out at your friends' houses once the pandemic is over. Restaurants too, for that matter, right? So you have to read the work of other writers. And when I read, I always have, maybe you wouldn't like this, you wouldn't let me borrow your books, but when I read, I write in the book. Not in a library book. But anyway, I take notes when I read, and I often underline and make notes to myself, because when I read, I'm a writer. I'm not just a reader. I pay attention. I think, what did I like about that? What did I like about that first paragraph that I just read? Why does it make me want to keep reading the book? And then I think, how can I do that? What can I learn from this writer? In the same way that if you were testing someone's recipe, you're like, maybe I need a little cilantro in my soup too, right? So test by reading. It's really important. And not giving up. It took me a very long time to get published. I wrote a manuscript. I can't even remember what year it was. I wrote a manuscript. I sent it to every Canadian publisher. Nobody wanted it. I wrote another manuscript. I sent it to every Canadian publisher. Do you think anyone took it? I'm giving you a pause so that you can think of the answer. I'm hoping you say yes, but the answer was no. I think I wrote 4 manuscripts before I made my first sale. And I was always a little bit embarrassed about that, but now I have a lot of friends who are children's writers, and you know what I found out? They all had the same experience, and some had to write 9 manuscripts before they made a first sale, right? But I learned from every single thing that I wrote. I think I got a little bit better with every attempt. And Another piece of really good advice: don't give up. If you expect it to be easy, this is the wrong business for you. But if you are the kind of person like me, kind of like determined, hardworking, enjoys a challenge, this might be for you. And then another thing, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question anymore or not, but I just love stories. I live for stories. You know, I'm a kind of a high-speed person, but when there's a story around, I slow down. I slow down and I gobble them up. Whether it's someone telling me a story, overhearing a story. I'm a very snoopy. I mean, I don't know if you could tell from looking at me, but I'm very snoopy. I listen into other people's conversations. You know, you're not allowed to get too close to anybody at the grocery store. That doesn't stop me. Even from a distance, I can listen. Anyway, that would be... Oh, I thought of one more bit of advice for you. I think of ideas when you wouldn't expect a person to be thinking of ideas. So writing doesn't only happen, like now I'm sitting at a table with my computer. It doesn't only happen to me when I'm sitting at a table at a computer. I get some of my best ideas when I jog. I'm a runner. And often I bring pen and paper with me, little pad. Now we're using phones more and more to write notes. But I get good ideas when I'm running. I get really good ideas in the shower, and apparently so do a lot of people, so that might be something you would consider too. But writing doesn't only happen at a desk. That's a very good question. I quite like it. There's a lot of good parts. One definitely best part is being able to do things like this, is being able to talk to young people about writing. I love it. I guess because I wished I'd had it when I was a kid, you know. It's fun to see your name in print. I mean, it's amazing, especially after all those years of like hoping. All I want is one book, and now I have 29 books, and like, I'm proud, and I'm allowed to say, I'm even allowed to boast about those 29 because it was hard, right? But I didn't give up. And you know what? This isn't only for writers. This is for whatever you want to be. Don't expect it to be easy, and don't give up, right? Stick with your dream. Stick with your dream, even if people tell you you shouldn't and you should give it up. People told me I shouldn't continue having my dream. My own dad told me to give up. He said, Monique, you're a teacher, you write for the newspaper. What are you working on these crazy kids' books? Nobody wants them. They're obviously not very good. But you know what? I didn't listen. I didn't listen to my dad. And the funny end of the story is that now, when my father hears me tell that story, he says, I never told her that. But he did. Believe me, I remember, because I took it in deep. Well, I find the rewriting hard, you know, going over and over, working with notes. And maybe the hardest part is fighting with myself, you know, thinking, it's not good enough, pushing harder, keep going back into it. That's rough, you know, like in principle, it all sounds great. Just sit at your desk and write. But the actual writing, that's the difficult part. I had 2 books come out this fall. One is called The Taste of Rain. It's a historical book, came out with Orca Book Publishers, and it's set during World War II at an internment camp in China. So a very different take on World War II. That's with Orca. Then I have this book with an American publisher called Carbon, Room for One More. And it's also a historical World War II story. It's complicated why they came out in the same season, but they did. And this book is about a boy, and it's based on a true story, a German boy who's adopted, German Jewish boy who's adopted by a family in Montreal and during World War II. And that's how the rest of the family learns about the war, through the kids in the family anyhow, learned through him. This is my newest Princess Angelica, I quite like this, illustrated by Jane Heinrichs, and this is the 3rd in my Princess Angelica series about a girl who pretends to be, in the first book she pretended to be a princess, Angelica, and in this one she's junior reporter. And I must say, it's just fun for me. These are like a blast writing them. I guess because, I was Princess Angelica. I wasn't a princess, but I pretended I was a princess. I like pretending. What can I say? And when you're a writer, you get to sort of try on different personalities. When you write first person, which is what I do, I get to be somebody different. Okay, the next book that I really sort of want to focus on a little bit today is a book that's very close to my heart. It's called I Am a Feminist, Claiming the F Word in Turbulent Times. Don't you love the cover? I love it, okay? Strong. It's by Orca Books, and it's a nonfiction book. Now, nonfiction is a very strong market in the world of children's literature, and I actually was asked by Orca to write some nonfiction, a previous one. I wrote a book about Passover, and I learned a lot. And then Orca they had a plan to develop their nonfiction line, and they gave us, the writers who had already worked for them, they gave us a list of topics and said, hey, if any of these grab you, let us know. And feminism was on the list. So the publisher gave us a list of topics that they were interested in. Orca was looking for nonfiction subjects or books about a subject. And I spotted feminism on the list. And as soon as I saw the word feminism, I knew I wanted to do it. And that's because I needed to learn more about feminism. I know I am a feminist, and I knew in general what the word means, that we believe in equality between men and women, boys and girls, whatever, right? Everybody's equal. We all have equal rights. We should have equal opportunities regardless of our race, our gender, our sexuality, anything, right? So I believed in all of that, but I really didn't know much about feminism. I didn't know about its history. I didn't know what was going on in the modern world of feminism. Wasn't familiar with things. So I like to write books where I learn a lot. And this book really changed me. It really had a very big impact on me personally. And maybe now I'll tell you something really personal about me. It's not that easy to tell, but it's not the first time I've said it in public. It's the first time I've said it during a pandemic in public. When I was a young woman, I was a victim of, I'm a survivor. I don't love the word victim, but I experienced relationship violence. And I'm a survivor of relationship violence. And I always thought, well, this is just what happened to me, bad luck, bad choices. And when I was working on the book, when I started looking at the numbers, because there's a section in the book about violence against women, and when I saw the numbers, and when I guess also I did a lot of interviews previous to the book too, but especially when I was working on the book, and I thought, when they say the personal is political, what happened was not just to me. It happens to so many women. And I wanted to look not just at that issue, but at those kinds of issues. What kind of world do we live in where we let bad things happen to certain people, in this case women, and it happens and it's accepted, and, we talk about fixing it, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm interested in a very alive kind of feminism. And I'm also interested in the subject of feminism because it comes up a lot in my classroom, and my students are 17 and 18 years old, and many of them don't want to use the word feminist. Even the girls in the classes, right? Young women. They don't, it's like, no, I believe in equality, but I don't want to be called a feminist. And if I say to the guys, are you a feminist? They're like, what would that mean? And I wanted to sort of take the stigma away by informing people what it really means. And maybe by getting people to stand up and when something around them is wrong, so that if you see, for instance, a girl being teased, they call it slut shaming, photos on the internet, these kinds of things that just happen, to say no, making jokes, rape jokes, for instance, say, no, we live in a world, we've got to speak up, and it doesn't matter whether we're women or men. Well, that's an easy one for me with the feminism book, because I hope that people will use that book to open up discussion and to say to their kids, what do you think? Are you a feminist? What do you know about feminism? Do you think, the world is still perfect? Have we created perfection? Is there equality? What about what's going on in other countries? That was something I learned a lot about too. And in many ways, if we live in North America, we're far more privileged. If you live in a comfortable house and you have books to read, we're the privileged ones, right? What about the women, the young girls, everybody? It doesn't just have to be about females, right? What about the people who have less privilege, right? What about the girls that aren't safe going to school? What about the many girls when they have their periods who can't attend school because there's no bathroom for them in the country where they live? Those are important questions, and we need to know that information. So I hope parents will use a book like I Am a Feminist to talk about those things and to say, let's have a look at what's going on in the world. So let's see, what am I allowed to tell you? I have my first picture book coming out. So a picture book is a book for very, very young readers. Most people think they're the easiest books to write, but they're the hardest. Oh, I can tell you, I can give you a little clue. Oops, I have to press close. Sorry, I lost you for a moment. For my picture book, it's about this guy that I wear on my neck. I call him the Monkey Man, and my picture book is his story. So it's a book for very, very young readers with very few words. It's coming out with Scholastic, and I think it's 2021. It will be illustrated, and that's an exciting event for me. I'm working on another nonfiction book for Orca, but I'm not sure whether I can tell you what the subject is, except that I picked it, and it's a subject that really interests me. Ooh, it has 4 letters, and it starts with the word W. I don't know if you can figure it out. Probably not. And I'm working on another fiction book that's coming out with Owl Kids, and that's a book about a subject having to do with divorce and the impact of divorce. But it's another topic that really. I felt that topic, and my parents weren't divorced, but I've been divorced, and sometimes it has a really big impact on kids. And my sister's a divorce lawyer, so she got me thinking about that topic. It was very nice to talk to you today, and I hope you got some information. Oh, you can check out, I have a website, www.moniquepolak.com. Send me a note. I'll have time. Because it's a pandemic, I'll write back. Okay, all the best. Take good care of yourselves. Read, write, and again, thank you to the young people for keeping the older ones like me safe. Thank you.